There we go. It's all yours, David.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being with us on this evening. My name is David Staniunas. I'm Records Archivist at the Presbyterian Historical Society. And I'm going to talk to you about how to maintain your own congregation's records. And then I'm going to shamelessly self-advertise for my institution at the table. So I'm going to, I should have, there it is. Sorry, I'm going to share my screen. Yes, I want that one. Okay. Great. Can everybody see a whole screen of just PowerPoint to hide behind? Excellent. So this is structured as like a series of the questions that we get the most frequently. And the first one that I've gotten the most is, where are y'all located? Are you the archives in Montreat? No, we're not. We're the Presbyterian Historical Society. We're organized in 1852 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We are the National Archives of the Peace USA. If you haven't heard of us, in the 172nd year of our existence, we collect records from the national agency level of the church, from synods and presbyteries, and crucially, from congregations. We grow by about 500 cubic feet every year, and about half of that is from congregations, both dissolved and active. We are your archives, and we're here to help do something that's fundamental to your faith tradition. Presbyterians are people of the book, by which we mean the Bible, the Book of Confessions, the Book of Order, and Robert's Rules Revised 3rd edition. You're not doing Presbyterianism if you're not keeping minutes per Robert's Rules. And this is enshrined in your very first Book of Order in 1789, chapter 20 of Clerks. Chapter 20 has not changed very much in more than 200 years. It's changed the name. It's G30107. But up until the 1980s, I think it moved to become like chapter 25. So it hasn't even moved around in the Book of Order. I guess the point is, we are how you execute the things that you have committed to over the last like 200 years. So what happens with most folks when they're examining their own church's records is they're stumped by the amount of stuff that's in front of them and they don't know where to begin. And so the first task that people have is appraisal. What's on the screen is a shipment that we got, I think, 2013 or 2015. There's a little church in Texas that called us up and said, hey, listen, we are 60 years old, but we're coming to the end of our ministry and we're going to send you everything that's in our church office. And I said, no, ma'am, you're not. And she said, too late. It's already on the Greyhound bus. And so we got 1,300 pounds of material from this one church, something to the tune of like 70 boxes of stuff, which I had to whittle down. And you'll see there's like a big stack on the left of like the same publication by their Presbyterian Mariners group. There's random files and paid bills and all kinds of junk that nobody needs to keep. So the best strategy when you're faced with like a big pile of stuff is to know in advance the bodies that you want to pull out of the wreckage. And for us, that's obviously your session minutes and your registers. Session minutes and registers are the essential records of your congregation. Without those, you can't be said to have ever existed. Those are the things we pull first. Hold up, let me see if I can go backwards. There is, of course, in addition to session minutes and registers, the stuff that we think of as permanent is like any records of any council of the church. So if you have trustees, deacons, women's groups, youth groups, and they kept narrative minutes, we think of those as permanent as well. The stuff that you identify that's vital records is usually going to be a very small amount of stuff, and it's usually going to be very information dense, right? It's going to be a small bucket. The next larger bucket surrounding that are records of commemorative value. So these are the kinds of records that flesh out the actions that are taken in session minutes and that kind of bring to life the lives of the people mentioned in registers. These can be photos, photo albums, newsletters, slide film, tape recordings, audio and video. What's on the screen is an image of a proud Girl Scout and her little brother, presumably from the Bay Ridge United Church in Brooklyn. Bay Ridge United was a joint RCA PCUSA congregation, and we had no evidence for the kind of social witness of the church or what the church was doing outside of its walls, except for this big run of photographs of their Girl Scout troop. Their troop didn't keep minutes or anything. Their troop didn't have registers, but we did have photographs of what this congregation was up to. So we think of all of that stuff as permanent as well. And I'll keep talking a little bit about commemorative records because they do things for the whole church, not just for your congregation alone. What's on the screen is the discovery of the infant Moses. It was a children's pageant by the, let me see if I can get this right, the Bohemian Brethren Church of Omaha, Nebraska. And so this was an immigrant church, right? These are Czech Reformed Protestants who settled in Nebraska and left behind like a trove of photographs in addition to their textual minutes. What strikes us when we find stuff like this is that it's a reminder that in the 20th century, the old Peace USA without parentheses, right? The old Peace USA took dramatic steps to bring immigrant communities to the table, right? For a long time, you had separate German synod, you had a couple of Welsh presbyteries, you had churches that entirely did their worship in Magyar or in Czech. And gradually, little by little, you know, all of these people were incorporated into like the entire General Assembly. And the stuff that these congregations leave behind is really a spur to action in the present for how we should be behaving toward our own new immigrant communities. All right, stepping off of the soapbox that I just got up onto. So the first little box you have is vital records. The bigger box is commemorative records. The biggest box of everything that you make is records of temporary value. One of your tasks is to actually do records management. We have a retention schedule on our website, which chunks out every kind of thing, or most of the kind of things that congregations keep, and assigns them a retention period. The short version of the retention schedule is just about every record of a financial transaction, just about, can be retained for 7 years. That's the period under which organizations can be audited for taxes. Anything older than 7 years usually can be shredded, but there's a lot of kind of ticky-tacky exceptions to that basic rule. And I will make sure, in addition to the PDF of this stuff, that you guys get a PDF of our retention schedule as well. I think I said securely shredded. So, wait, you mean that I should be using paper for permanent records, David, in the year of our Lord 2024? Yeah, I kind of am. We, of necessity, are going, I think, to continue to live in a hybrid digital and paper record keeping environment. And that's owing to the different things that digital texts and paper bound texts do well. One of the things that paper does well is that it carries traces of its own authenticity in the body, right? These traces are part of the science of diplomatics. So we call them diplomatic traces. Diplomatics is the science of verifying authenticity of documents. On the screen, we have some of the examples of how you make sure that a document can be regarded as reliable. If anybody sees one of those diplomatic traces or thinks they do, just, you know, unmute and yell at me.
It would be that signature there, right there, that says that they were approved by the Presbytery.
You have a signature of approval by the presbytery. You have the stamp of the presbytery itself, right? You have the signature of the clerk of session. You have a date. If I had panned this page out all the way, you could see that it has page numbering. One of the things that page numbering does on the surface of the text is it makes it clear when something has been inserted, and it makes it clear when something has been deleted. In a digital environment, we go to great lengths to kind of replicate the authenticity of paper. We have third parties verifying signatures, and we have all kinds of little widgets and gewgaws that help us believe that a document is reliable. But one of the things that paper helps contribute to is an atmosphere of reliability in the text. Oh, one of the other reasons why we continue to recommend keeping an acid-free paper version of your minutes, understanding that everything is going to begin in a digital format to begin with. One of the reasons why we still believe that paper has value is that it allows us to eliminate some of the technical dependencies between the reader and the text. So what do I mean by a technical dependency? What's on the screen is session minutes from a little church in St. Louis, Missouri. I think they were organized about the 1880s. They dissolved in the 20-teens. And they had a full run of session minutes, like the whole way through 1880s to the teens, except for the 1990s, when their clerk of session decided only to keep the minutes on floppy disks. Okay, so there's your first technical dependency, is you are reliant on a piece of hardware that can fail or become obsolete. The second thing they did was they didn't just keep like, gosh, these are 1992. They could have had word perfect documents and we would be way better off. But they chose a software format that is nigh upon unrecognizable. PWP is actually like an image format. So they have minutes saved as individual images, one page per file, as near as I could tell. So we've got a hardware dependency, we've got a software dependency. Software becomes obsolete, can't be read, hardware can fail. We also have like a power dependency, right? we rely on a fully electrified environment in order to gain access to texts. And that sounds like a stretch for like the extremely technologized United States, but in some other parts of the world, I'm getting a phone call, that's annoying. In other places, having a text that you can read just, with a light source and your own eyes is, the ultimate lack of a technical dependency. So I haven't even talked at all about kind of best practices for your minutes, apart from saying print out session minutes to paper. Obviously, the stuff that you're making is going to begin in a digital environment. You're making them in, Microsoft Word or a Google Doc. So the best practice that we've seen is to have both a PDF copy of your minutes and also a paper version of your minutes. So every time that you get your minutes approved by session, compile them to a PDF document, keep a big stack of PDF documents in a folder or whatever your preferred form of storage is. When it's time to get your minutes reviewed by Presbytery, compile all of those minutes to a single PDF document, get that reviewed, get your stamps and seals and stuff assigned by Presbytery, and then at that point, that's a good time to print to acid-free paper. I think that's basically the best case scenario going forward for congregations minutes. I'm going to take a second and talk about distinctions between the classic three-post Cokesbury register and contemporary church membership management systems. What's on the screen is an information-dense church register. It's 2 pages of marriages. What do we have? Like a dozen marriages, maybe 10 or 12, representing 24 people, and it's a single frame image. It's very lightweight, digitally speaking. This is a screen grab from, I think, Servant Keeper 7, and it represents one individual, and it has 11 billion different fields of information related to that individual, including their phone number, whether they're married, whether they've had a background check. There's a bunch of tabs for other attributes, for records of giving. And so ultimately, a church membership management piece of software is a fantastic tool for the present day when you are trying to manage like a very large church and do a mass mailing, or you're trying to gain insights about stewardship and fundraising, and compile those. It's a way, way, way more robust tool than we need for the next like 50 years of just information gathering. And I'm reminded of another kind of, I guess, is this a software innovation or a hardware innovation? Another office technology innovation of the 20th century, the file, the index card file. So this is actually a register from a really big church in Chicago, that at the turn of the 19th, early 20th century realized that their registers had a problem. They weren't infinitely extensible, right? Those books are like, you can't just grow them exponentially. And so they converted to recording all of their membership information on index file cards. And so you'll have a file for, you'll have a index card for when Joe Smith joined the congregation, when Joe Smith was baptized, when Joe Smith got married, when Joe Smith died. And there'll be 4 index cards just for Joe Smith, which is great. I mean, it's an extensible system, but 50 years later, 100 years later, it becomes impossible for archivists to deal with. And I guess I'm talking about my own druthers and my own preferences here, but it becomes impossible to gain a sense of the date span of the records. I don't know what date span the baptisms for this church are. I don't know what date span the marriages for this church are. I don't know what date span the whole register is unless I look at every single one of those index cards. It also becomes not information dense, right? If we were going to try to digitize this content in order to make it accessible, we would have one person's name per index card, and it would go on for tens of thousands of pages. So this is all kind of by way of saying, like, church membership management software does an excellent task in the present. The church register, like the classic form of the church register, does a totally different, well, it does a related but a different task. It takes a much smaller set of information and keeps it forever, rather than having like a very vast amount of information and dealing with it in the short term. Sweet. How can your National Archives help you right now? So the first thing that we do for active congregations is depositing original records. So if you have permanent records that are in not great storage conditions, a basement, an attic, a clerk of sessions home, and you're running out of space for them, we bring those in on deposit. So we do about 300 feet of congregation records a year, and about 40% of that is for active congregations. Everything that we hold for a congregation that's older than 50 years, we make accessible to the general public. Everything gets described in a database so anybody in the world can see that the records exist. And that means that anybody in the world can request digitization of anything that's older than 50 years. Unlike, say, giving your records to the local library or giving them to a college or university, we execute deposit agreements with congregations, not deeds of gift. You are not giving away your records. The clerk of session is the constitutional authority about those records. That means that you can get them back if you, for instance, embark on like a long self-study, or you're writing a church history and you need access to like your very first volume of session minutes, we'll happily ship them back to you by UPS. The second thing that we do, and we do a fair amount of it, is we digitize records. We have two staffers who are our digitization specialists, and they image more than 60,000 pages of text and images every single year. And the lion's share of that work is done for congregations. That work is, those jobs are paid. We charge 70 cents per page to image records. That's more expensive than Staples. We give you a vastly superior product to Staples, and that's cheaper than would get done at like a university library. Circling back a little bit, depositing records carries no costs with it. That to us is something that you have paid for through per capita. Digitization, we just try to break even on those jobs. Okay, I promised that I would do some shameless self-promotion. So this is just a little summary of some of the other cool stuff that we've been doing over the past few years. We have in the past like 5 or so years taken greater steps to more faithfully respond to the needs of the Peace USA, especially with regard to issues of peace and justice. I think this really got put into focus after Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, and we got called upon to actually visit the island and help people preserve records that had been damaged by the hurricane. In 2020, largely because a lot of us were on lockdown in the early days of COVID, we adopted new means of reaching into the church. We launched 2 different all video collections, just of videos downloaded straight from the internet, from like churches' YouTube pages and churches' Facebook pages. The first was the COVID-19 Easter under COVID collection during what we really thought was going to be the only Easter under COVID. We collected worship services from around the denomination during that Easter. And then following in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, we developed the Black Lives Matter video collection, where we did basically the same thing, just identified newsworthy places where Presbyterians were responding to or walking alongside and accompanying the Black Lives Matter movement. We brought in more than 100 individual videos, including like news feeds, people's Facebook posts, and stuff like that. One of the things that's been ongoing since 2018 is an intentional and funded collecting initiative, the African American Leaders in Congregations Initiative. We have a 5-figure fund dedicated specifically to preserving Black Presbyterian history. And the main fruit of that initiative, whoops, we got one more. Main fruit of that initiative has been the complete digitization of the personal papers of Katie Geneva Cannon. Dr. Cannon, of course, was the first Black woman ordained in the Peace USA in 1974. And it was her will that part of her stuff go to Union Seminary in Richmond, part of it go to Union Seminary in New York, and then the biggest part come to PHS. And it was our promise to her family that we would unite those 3 collections virtually by getting them loaned to us, and then shipping them back out to their future owners. That project took 2 years. We imaged 15,000 pages of text and images just of Katie's. And we did scores of hours of audio and video digitization as well. And all of that is up online in our digital archives. About since 2015, we've had an intentional collecting initiative dedicated to the about 50-year struggle for ordination and marriage equality in the church. That initiative is named after the Presbyterian activist Pam Byers, who was active in the Covenant Network of Presbyterians. We're looking forward to helping more Light Presbyterians this year celebrate the 50th year of their existence. I honestly thought I got rid of that. We have been working with other archives to digitize some of their content and put it into our digital collections. The guy on the right is Milton Arthur Galamison, who was the Presbyterian minister of Siloam Church in Brooklyn, New York. And in 1964, 65, I forget, he led a boycott of New York City public schools among Black school children and Puerto Rican school children, protesting the shoddy conditions at their schools. And over the last few years, we've been paying attention to the southern border of the United States and the work and witness of Presbyterians who have been doing sanctuary. So this is one video appearance with Marianne Lundy, who's to date, so far, the only Presbyterian who's done time for work in the sanctuary movement. She did 30 days of house arrest. And Patty Barcelo, who was actually a person who was sheltered, I believe, by Southminster Church, Tucson, and John Fife up there in the top right. Finally, we are in year 1 of a National Endowment for the Humanities grant supporting digitization of more than 22,000 images from the Religious News Service Photo Morgue. RNS operated under that name from 1948 until 1984. In 84, we got their morgue and stored it. And we are just now moving into a massive digitization campaign. That's our website at the top. That is my email address, and that is my office phone number. I'm gonna let those sit on the screen for a while. And I honestly came in with the intention of speaking not a whole lot and leaving a lot of time for questions. So
Well,
I would love to open it up to questions.
I'll kick it off, David. So we have on this call right now, we have clerks of session from various size and pastors from various sized churches. And so if they were desiring to, and have never sent anything to you, because some of them are in that situation, because we've been kind of talking about this for a couple of years. As they gather together or consider, the session considers sending things to you, could you kind of just give them an overview of what kind of things it would be that if I were going to start at point A and work my way through, what things might a church or session decide that is worthy to send you? You've given some clues to that, but very specifically the main bullet points of how to start and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, if you were going to do anything at all, I would say look at your complete run of session minutes and registers. Keep with you anything that you refer frequently to. Maybe keep around the last 20 years or so of your session minutes. But really anything that you don't refer frequently to is a good candidate for deposit here, and also a good candidate for digitization.
Kind of had those discussions with clerk of session training that we have these little things called tornadoes and floods and fires that impact the history of all of our churches. So that's kind of where we went with that.
Yeah, it's the truth of the matter is that nobody is going to be immune to climate change. That's one of the things that we're learning. There's nobody who's going to be immune. In the last couple of years, I've had a lot more traffic from uh, the Gulf Coast and the South Atlantic than I had in the prior 10 years. So folks in Louisiana and the Panhandle of Florida are paying a lot more attention to that stuff. It's not like Philly is immune. We had a superstorm called Sandy about 11 years ago. Folks remember that. But I think the greatest gift that your archives can give to your congregation is you go from having a storage scenario where best case scenario, there's like one person paying attention to your records. It's either going to be your clerk of session or your church administrator. You go into a realm where you have a staff of 25 that is paying attention to all of the records of the church. You're getting more bodies onto your content, basically. And you and I are talking about like fires and floods and hurricanes and tornadoes. One of the easiest ways to lose access to your records is to lose the key to the fireproof safe that you put them in. I think that if you're going to continue to store your content on site at your church, you don't have to overthink it. It's entirely okay to keep records in like a box in a closet, so long as it is away from light and water. And it's in a zone where like human beings are comfortable, so not a basement or an attic. That is a totally okay form of storage. Fireproof safes are great. You need to be able to get them open and you need to make sure that they are not in the basement. More than once, I've been called up because a church kept their fireproof safe in the basement of the church building and they had a flood. And so the records were totally safe from fire. The problem was their safe filled up with water. And when they finally opened it, they had like a mold slurry happening. So, yeah, there are a lot of reasons to have, more people paying attention to your stuff.
So one of the things you talked to Nicole and I about as far as sending presbytery stuff was when you decide to send things, how do you give the clues to what's in the box that you're sending, and how do you, and packaging it, and also commemorating that this is what I sent. And so you talked to Nicole and I about that one day when we were on with you, just the two of us. So might want to share that with this group also.
Yeah, you don't have to overthink making an inventory. What is helpful to us is to just say like, okay, I'm shipping you 7 volumes of session minutes. You don't have to enumerate like what date everything is from. We can figure that out because you dated things and we can read them. But it is helpful to open up a package and understand immediately that everything that was intended to be in the package is there. So session minutes, 7 volumes is a perfectly fine kind of cover letter to throw in. You should pack material in a sturdy corrugated cardboard box. You should insulate the kind of block of volumes of records. You should insulate that from the edges of the box with either wadded newsprint or bubble wrap. And you should strap a lot of shipping tape around the the longitudes of the box. And then we recommend shipping by UPS.
It might be wise also, I mean, Westminster Omaha sent you their materials and they were very diligent about getting that sent to you. I think that was a nice overview that you shared with Nicole and I also about how Westminster, these churches that are here tonight are not ones that are looking at dissolving. However, in that scenario with Westminster Omaha, they had sent you a plethora of pieces. And so that might be helpful for these folks to hear that too, David.
Pat, I don't remember what Westminster said off the top of my head. But fortunately for us, we have databases for that. So
okay, because I think they sent all kinds of pictures without identifying information. And they sent that kind of stuff that they had in their records that they probably sent you way more than needed to be sent. Some of it would probably be better having been shredded or sent to a local historical group.
So yeah, there are some gray areas. I mean, I don't remember Westminster off the top of my head, and I apologize for that. But about 10% of what we bring in, well, like I guess the equivalent of 10% of our new accessions is actually like shred on accession, because a lot of times dissolved churches or dissolving churches will just send in temporary financial records, for example, paid bills, just whatever is there will show up here. And we have pretty airtight agreements with presbyteries, which are the owners and stewards of dissolved congregation records. Just about every presbytery lets us delete things as we see fit. One of the kind of gray areas that we run into sometimes is, like at the beginning, I said, photographs are worth keeping. Okay, great. Do you mean every single photograph that the congregation has ever taken and shot? Well, no, effectively, no, I don't mean that. So we kind of privilege photographs based on their age, just because the older a photograph is, the harder it was to take, right? The harder it was to reproduce. So if you have a photo like from the 1920s of a children's pageant where they're discovering the infant Moses, that would be very valuable to preserve and keep. Or if you have like a panorama of the Women's Association from the 1940s, cornerstone laying, installation of a minister, like things that document major moments in a church's life, hang on to those. On the other end of the spectrum are kind of photographs of casual events that are recurring and more recent in time. So if you have 3 photo albums of the same church picnic from 1990, that would be like a candidate to select out a handful of those for deposit here, but otherwise to kind of distribute those to interested congregation members, or to just leave out of a shipment entirely. Hey, Mike.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, David. I have a question. You recommended earlier, keeping roughly 20 years or so of session minutes that you might refer to, on the acid-free paper on site. Anything older than that would be good candidates to send into you to store. What about, can we, and would you recommend us or those churches that can, scan and create our own, drive space of PDFs that we keep in our own Google workspace for our staff and our session members to access? So in essence, the PDF that we create, we can store that locally on our cloud and create a filing folder system that we can access as staff and session members for the same minutes, but we're just keeping acid-free paper version and a local digital version on our own network. Is that something we're free to pursue also?
Oh, you're very much free to do that. Yeah, I think the best model that I've seen actually is what the Presbyterian New York City started doing about 10 years ago, where they would compile their minutes to PDF. That presbytery publishes all their minutes, so they would have a PDF just sitting on their website. They would create a PDF-A, and we can get into the variations of like the sub formats of PDF if you want, but they would make a PDF-A version and store that in their local storage. And then they would print an acid-free paper version fill up a binder with it. When that binder was full, they would deposit that with us. So we're like your worst case scenario backstop.
Okay. Yeah, and do you recommend, like, if we have, for instance, we already have acid-free paper copies of minutes from, 5-6 years ago, but we want to digitize those for our own local folder system. Can we scan those?
Yeah, absolutely.
And create retroactively the same, if we want to have a system not just going forward of PDFs, but also what we haven't done in the last 5 years or so, or keep a digital copy in addition to what we're keeping free. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Our only advice for folks who want to scan their own stuff is we recommend shooting at 600 DPI, full color, so 24-bit RGB, and then compile documents that resemble the original, so that you have like a one-to-one relationship between the digital surrogate and the original thing.
Right.
So,
okay.
So if you have like 2 volumes of session minutes that you want to scan, turn them into 2 PDF documents.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Good.
Others. And some of you may not have understood anything what I'm glad that Mike and David were talking the same language, but that might have been over the heads of some of us.
No.
Well, maybe some, but no, I don't mean that to be critical. I just mean that sometimes understanding some of that is always a struggle.
I can talk about why we recommend PDF versus other formats also, if that gives people a little bit more confidence. PDF has been widely adopted in government and in healthcare for about the last 30 years as a sustainable format for text. Adobe, the company that created it, has published the standard. So it's an open standard for formatted text. That means that if Adobe goes bankrupt tomorrow, other people will be able to create and produce PDF documents and to read them. This is why you can, export a Word document to PDF. This is why you can export like the contents of a website to PDF. It's essentially like printed text. There are a bunch of substandards of PDF. Of course, if you have, I don't know, it's tax season. If you have filled out your tax forms in PDF, you'll know that they have individual fields and little boxes that you can fill in. That is, some of those functions are permissible in like the plain vanilla PDF standard. PDF-A stands for archival, and it disables form filling and signatures, and I think web links are also killed. So I think it kills off hyperlinks. So PDF-A is designed to represent just the bare text as it stood in one moment in time, and to disable anything that could mess with that bare text. We use it because it makes long-term digital preservation vastly easier. It means that we have files that are not trying to go out and do other stuff when you open them up. That's basically why we use PDF.
I would just like to say, I found the presentation just fascinating. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I've done some browsing through the website. It's a great website, a great tool. And just to let everyone here know, David has been super helpful and responsive. So he put his email and phone number up there. So really he's, there to be helpful for all of us. Another thing that I will say too, that I've referred people to the Historical Society website, is when I will get calls, and maybe some of the churches do as well, from someone saying, I was baptized back in, 1949 at, one of our churches that no longer exists. And so there is a form that can be filled out on the Historical Society website where people can request those records that are probably now housed there, and they do the work of that. So if someone is getting married and they need proof of baptism, or they're interested in that kind of thing, that's another thing that can be requested from the organization. And I've referred several people to that, and I know that that has been a very responsive thing. So
yeah, I thank you, Nicole. That's a great reminder, and I totally skipped one of the biggest parts of the work that we do, which is reference services. We field more than 2,500 questions a year from Presbyterians and from the general public, people who are interested in foreign mission history, genealogists who want to figure out where people are buried, and living people who need attestation of baptism. Baptismal attestation is the thing you're talking about. And so if one of the ways that we can serve, if we have your records, is instead of tasking your church administrator with the work of looking up somebody's baptism or fielding requests from genealogists, you can just go, all of that stuff is in Philadelphia. Here is their email, and you can just refer all of those people back to us. I'm going to put at least one link in the chat. And that's another way of saying, like, thank you, Nicole, for lifting me up. But none of this work would be possible if we didn't have like a complete staff of 25 folks, including like 15 professional archivists, doing this work every day. I'm going to drop a link to our digital collections in the chat. And I'm also going to put in, since we're talking about reference, email to our main email account for just general questions about stuff. That's refdesk@history.pcusa.org.
And you did say that, when people wonder what per capita helps pay for, you would be it.
We are one of the people that are on per capita. Absolutely. About 2/3 of our budget is per capita. The other third is designated, so it's money that we have to fundraise.
And I do remember when I took the stated clerk training, I remember you giving a presentation, and also you using some churches, particularly African-American churches that no longer exist, but the genealogy was incredibly important as well, and that one that you talked about with the Czech community really hits right at home.
Oh yeah.
Omaha. So that's in the immigrant communities. So that was a great reference.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I tell people is that the records that you make are not just for you and your people alone. They serve like the entire church, because the church is connectional. And Pat, you're reminding me of the stories that I like to tell. One of the chief examples of that is one time, a few years ago, we have just about all of the original records of First African Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia, which is the first church of freed Black people in the denomination. Except their first church register is gone. It's just lost to time. And a few years ago, we had a researcher come in who looked at every single church register in Philadelphia for the period between 1807 and 1847. 1807 is when First Af gets started. 1847 is when what was then called Second Colored Presbyterian Church gets started. And so in that time period, there's only one Black Presbyterian church in the city. They went looking at every other register for people that said at the tail end, dismissed to colored church. And so through that, they were able to, by looking at every other church's register, they were able to like resuscitate the original membership of First Af, because there was no other Black Presbyterian church available. So it was kind of like creating a record out of the negative space of other records.
It is fascinating work.
I
Oh,
have-
Joyce,
Yeah, I
yes.
have a question. And it's really just curiosity.
Oh, sure.
The other day I was doing some genealogy work on ancestry.com and some records came up that were baptism records from a German Presbyterian church out east, Patterson, New Jersey, from like the 1890s. And then the deaths of, gosh, 6 children on a pond. So it was very that were recorded at that church. And so it made me curious, whether that was just kind of a one-off, or whether, like, if we were doing genealogy and they were Presbyterian people, would any of those show up on like ancestry.com, any of those records, or would we need to go to PHS?
So odds are you were already looking at records that are housed at PHS.
Okay.
From 2012 to 2015, we had a partnership with Ancestry.com where they actually stationed workers in our building and scanned as many church registers as they could possibly get their hands on, with the promise that we would get digital access to them after like a 3-year embargo period. So all of that stuff is up in Ancestry. I'm going to refrain from commenting on the rest of the deal, but it is a great resource for genealogists. And we've made use of other kinds of partnership as well to do mass digitization projects. Back when institutional funders funded that kind of thing, which they don't anymore. We had a partnership with Duke Divinity School where they paid the Internet Archive to scan a bunch of microfilm from the churches in North Carolina. Every North Carolina presbytery. So North Carolina Presbytery microfilm is in the Internet Archive. And we partnered with the State Archives of Alaska to image the complete Sheldon Jackson papers. And Sheldon Jackson's collection is actually getting used really extensively now by people at the Sealaska Heritage Museum who are trying to track down specifically Tlingit artifacts. I don't know about any remains, but definitely Tlingit funerary artifacts that Sheldon Jackson looted and brought to the East Coast. So hopefully that digitization will help lead to some repatriation as well.
David, this is Jane from Hope Presbyterian, and I have a quick question for you. When we send everything in, we send the big register book. How far back do we need to make copies of that to keep at the church? Or what I started, and I've gone back already, I think 6 or 8 years, I've redone the whole register and just put like baptisms, new members. So each year I have a recollection of who joined in like 2018, 2019, 2020. And then I have one of the deaths and the births and the marriages. How far back are we supposed to keep those, or the registers?
You should hold on to whatever is useful to you, I would say. And I'm sorry if that's a vague answer, but it really is kind of a your mileage may, it's a kind of a your mileage may vary kind of situation.
Okay.
And again, you can, I think when I say like not frequently referred to, I guess I'm imagining a scenario where you have a volume that is still being added to. Like if you have a register that is physically active, definitely keep that one on you. But if you have very old registers that are totally closed and filled, that would be a pretty good candidate to put on deposit elsewhere.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
So any other questions for David? Because we're close to our hour timeline. We really appreciate, David, you're spending time with us this evening. I think everybody has walked away with some information, with some maybe additional questions, and you've given us your contact information. And we'll make sure that the recording of this has been saved, as well as we'll just make available the PowerPoint when you get that to us, the slides. So that's really, we appreciate your time here this evening. So with that, I think I will, unless there's some other questions. Did you have another question, Mike? Oh, I saw you on, so.
No, I was just gonna say, well done, David. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes,
Of
thank
course,
you.
I appreciate
Well-
y'all for giving up some of your evening as well.
So with that, I'm going to say just a very brief blessings to all of you as you go forward this evening. We're grateful for David and his skills and the knowledge that he has given to us this evening, and go forth this evening and have a blessed evening with you and your family. So thank you very much for being with us this evening.
Everybody.
I think.